You know how galactic conquerors usually demand your toughest soldier? Well, Commander Vexar showed up in armor made of satellite dishes and gave Earth an ultimatum. Send your most dangerous warrior, or face total annihilation. The problem? Our best fighters were all off-planet. So we did the only thing we could. We sent Marvin Bookworth, substitute librarian. You know how Tuesdays are supposed to be boring? Commander Vexar clearly didn't get that memo. His ship just appeared over Earth's atmosphere without any warning protocols. It was this massive wedge-shaped thing covered in what looked like old satellite dishes and antenna arrays, all pointed in different directions. The technology had this weird familiarity to it. Like someone took every piece of human communication equipment and welded it to a battleship. His announcement came through every frequency simultaneously. No introductions, no pleasantries, just this booming voice declaring Earth's participation in something called the Trial of Doom. Each species in the galactic community had to send their most dangerous warrior for evaluation. Failure to comply meant immediate elimination by the combined fleets of the Galactic Council. It was the worst talent show invitation in human history. Down in the Earth Defense Headquarters, General Hawkins watched the transmission with that particular brand of panic you get when you realize you've been cast in a play you never auditioned for. Her committee members were frantically checking their screens, looking for options that didn't exist. The stakes were extinction versus sending one person to what sounded like a gladiatorial reality show. She tried to negotiate, asking for clarification, maybe a little more time to prepare. Vexar's response came through with the warmth of a frozen computer chip. His patience appeared to be as thin as the metallic plating on his armor. The countdown began the moment he finished speaking, 24 hours to produce Earth's champion or face orbital bombardment. The problem was immediate and obvious. Earth's actual dangerous people were all conveniently elsewhere. Special forces teams were running jungle exercises in the Amazon with no satellite phones. NASA's best were calibrating equipment on Mars. Even the regular military's top personnel were scattered across the globe on various missions. The committee kept scanning deployment maps, watching those red dots spread across continents like they were actively avoiding being available. This is apparently how interstellar politics works when you're the new species on the block. You don't get negotiations or considerations. You get arbitrary demands and impossible deadlines. The galactic community seemed to operate on the principle of throwing newcomers into the deep end to see if they can swim. Earth was about to discover it had been signed up for a swimming competition without knowing how to float. The clock kept ticking down, and every minute felt heavier than the last. They needed someone who could represent humanity's fighting spirit without getting vaporized in the first 30 seconds of whatever this trial involved. The traditional definition of warrior was looking increasingly inadequate for the situation. They were going to have to get creative, and creativity under existential threat is never a comfortable position to be in. Picture Earth's best fighters scattered across the globe exactly when you don't want them scattered. NASA's top team was busy aligning telescope arrays on Mars, completely unaware that an alien warship was currently parked between Earth and the Moon. Their communications were limited to mission-specific channels. Nobody thought to call Mars to warn them about the interstellar crisis happening at home. Meanwhile, Special Forces units were conducting joint operations deep in the Amazon rainforest. They deliberately cut off external communications to simulate behind enemy lines conditions. The irony was almost beautiful. Earth's most capable fighters were playing war games while the real thing hovered overhead. General Hawkins stared at the global deployment map in the Situation Room. Red markers dotted continents, and a few even showed up on the Moon and Mars. Each glowing dot represented another specialist who couldn't be reached in time. The military's contingency plans covered nuclear war, asteroid impacts, even zombie outbreaks if you believed the more creative documents. None of the binders contained protocols for alien talent show demands. The committee started throwing out increasingly desperate suggestions. Someone proposed sending a charismatic politician who could talk their way through the trial. Another suggested a famous action movie star who'd played warriors in films. The most concerning idea involved a trained bear from a wildlife sanctuary. The conversation kept circling back to the same problem. Earth's idea of a warrior didn't match what the aliens expected. Reality settled over the room like a cold blanket. Traditional military strength wasn't going to solve this. They needed someone who represented humanity's best qualities without relying on combat skills. The perfect candidate would need intelligence, composure under pressure, and the ability to think differently than everyone else in the room. The definition of warrior was undergoing a forced evolution in real time. It wasn't about physical strength or weapon proficiency anymore. It became about psychological resilience, problem-solving ability, and representing human civilization's unique characteristics. They needed someone who wouldn't panic when facing unknown challenges. Every minute that passed closed another potential option. Command centers around the world reported back the same frustrating news. Their best people were unreachable or unsuitable. The clock kept counting down toward the deadline, and the options kept shrinking. The committee members started looking at each other with that particular expression people get when they realize they might have to volunteer for something terrible. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but they were running out of people to consider. The pool of potential candidates had essentially dried up. They needed to find someone who could survive not through combat, but through cleverness. Someone who represented humanity's ability to adapt and overcome unexpected challenges. The solution wasn't in any military database or personnel file. It was going to require looking in places they'd never considered before. The traditional warrior model had failed them completely. Brute force wouldn't work against an opponent who could destroy planets. They needed a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't come from muscles or weapons but from intelligence and creativity. Meanwhile, in a library that carried the specific scent of aging paper and subtle desperation, Marvin Bookworth was having the most normal Tuesday imaginable. He'd been a substitute librarian for 8 years now, which meant he'd perfected the art of temporary permanence. He knew every system, every shelf, every patron's reading habits, but none of it officially belonged to him. His biggest conflict this week had been a budget meeting about replacing the worn-out "Quiet Please" signs. The debate had gotten surprisingly heated over sans serif versus serif fonts. Marvin didn't fight wars in the traditional sense. His battles were against disorganization, misinformation, and the chronic problem of books being shelved in the wrong sections. He approached these problems with the precision of a surgical strike, using cross-references and categorization systems as his weapons of choice. The Dewey Decimal System was his battle plan, and he executed it with quiet determination. When the military escort arrived at the library, Marvin assumed it was about those overdue astronomy books from the research department. They'd been out for 6 months despite multiple polite notices. He gathered his overdue file, put on his slightly faded cardigan, the one with the elbow patches that had seen better decades, and followed the soldiers to their vehicle. He made sure to set the library's automated closing procedures before leaving. General Hawkins watched this unassuming man enter the Situation Room. He carried a folder of overdue notices instead of weapons, wore comfortable shoes instead of combat boots, and had the calm demeanor of someone who spent his days helping people find information. Where others saw a mild-mannered librarian, Hawkins saw something different. She saw composure under pressure, systematic thinking, and a mind trained to organize chaos. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. This trial wasn't necessarily about combat. Vexar had called it a test of a species' most dangerous warrior, but he hadn't specified what made someone dangerous. In an information-based challenge, maybe their best weapon wasn't a soldier at all. Maybe it was someone who understood how knowledge worked, how to structure it, how to find patterns in apparent randomness. Marvin represented the most dangerous thing Earth had to offer: organized knowledge. Humanity's advantage wasn't in our physical strength or weapon technology. It was in our ability to collect, categorize, and retrieve information. Libraries weren't just buildings with books. They were the physical manifestation of our species' collective intelligence. The quiet competence of librarians was the foundation that made advanced civilization possible. The committee members watched as Marvin politely asked if they'd received his notices about the overdue materials. He explained the library's new automated reminder system, while the generals stared in disbelief. What had seemed like desperation minutes ago suddenly looked like genius. They weren't sending a weak representative. They were sending the embodiment of human civilization's greatest strength. Marvin adjusted his glasses and asked what exactly this was about. Since it clearly wasn't the astronomy books, his expression showed polite curiosity rather than fear or confusion. He stood there in his worn cardigan, surrounded by military personnel and advanced technology, completely unfazed by the unusual circumstances. The substitute librarian was ready to do his job, whatever that job might turn out to be. So General Hawkins did what commanders do when the rulebook catches fire. She improvised. When she introduced Marvin to Vexar's holographic projection, she called him one of Earth's most specialized operatives without blinking. Her voice carried that particular military confidence that makes unbelievable statements sound like official policy. Marvin adjusted his glasses and gave her a politely confused look. "Specialized in what exactly?" he asked in that quiet library voice that could calm down rowdy students. He genuinely seemed to be wondering if he'd missed a memo about expanded job responsibilities. Hawkins didn't miss a beat. She explained he worked in information warfare and psychological operations. The term sounded impressive and vaguely threatening when spoken in a military context. Her face remained perfectly serious, the way only someone who's briefed presidents can manage. Technically, she wasn't even lying. Librarians do engage in information warfare every day, battling misinformation, fighting against knowledge gaps, defending against the chaos of poor organization. And psychological operations? Anyone who's convinced a teenager to read classic literature or talked a patron out of believing conspiracy theories knows about influencing minds. Vexar's image leaned forward, his satellite dish armor shifting with a soft metallic sound. He scanned Marvin up and down, looking for hidden weapons or armor beneath the cardigan and the folder of overdue notices. His sensors probably detected paper fibers, ink, and the faint scent of old books rather than energy signatures or combat enhancements. What the Galactic commander saw was a man who looked like he spent more time with filing systems than fitness regimens. Calm efficiency showed in the way Marvin organized his papers. The slightly tired eyes suggested someone who'd seen one too allergic to returning books on time. There was no aggression in his posture, no combat readiness, just the patient demeanor of someone used to explaining things multiple times. Marvin muttered, "As ready as I'll ever be," I suppose more to himself than anyone else. He stepped onto the alien transport platform like he was stepping into a slightly unfamiliar library branch. The technology didn't seem to faze him half as much as the thought of those overdue astronomy books still being out there somewhere. He wasn't thinking about glory or victory. In his mind, this was just another job assignment, albeit on a considerably larger scale than usual. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, but what really concerned him was whether he'd set the library's thermostat correctly before leaving. Priorities remain priorities even during interstellar crises. Earth's chosen champion carried no weapons, wore no armor, and his only preparation had been 8 years of managing information systems and dealing with difficult patrons. The Galactic trial was about to meet someone who considered proper filing more important than fighting skills. Vexar's warriors would be expecting combat. They'd get organization instead. The orbital arena wasn't quite what Marvin expected. It had gladiator pit elements, dim lighting, sand-covered floor, spectator stands filled with alien species, but also blinding studio lights and camera drones buzzing around like oversized mechanical insects. The whole place felt like someone combined ancient Roman spectacle with modern reality television production values. Marvin adjusted his glasses and took it all in with the same expression he used when assessing a new library branch's layout. His competitors looked like they'd stepped out of some dystopian fantasy convention. There was the 7-foot-tall creature they called Gorthak the Bone Crusher. His hands appeared capable of crushing solid granite into powder, and he kept flexing them with audible cracking sounds. Then there was Zepha the Mind Melter, who didn't move at all. She just stood perfectly still, and when you looked at her, you could feel your thoughts starting to rearrange themselves uncomfortably. The third was Crocs the Unstoppable, who seemed to be more machine than organism, with metallic parts that clicked and whirred with every motion. These weren't just individual warriors. Each represented their species' entire combat philosophy made flesh and metal. Gorthak embodied pure physical dominance, Zepha represented psychological warfare, and Croc stood for technological enhancement pushed to its absolute limits. They were walking statements about what their civilizations valued in conflict. Each champion made elaborate threats and boasts about their upcoming victory. Gorthak promised to break every bone in Marvin's body in alphabetical order. Zepha offered to rearrange his memories so he'd forget how to breathe. Croc simply emitted a low humming sound that made the arena floor vibrate ominously. They postured and threatened like characters from an over-the-top action drama. Marvin ignored the theatrical displays completely. He found a relatively clean spot on the arena floor, sat down and pulled out his Intergalactic Combat for Dummies manual. He started reading it carefully, occasionally making notes in the margins with a pencil he'd brought from the library. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. 3. Alien warriors preparing for glorious combat while a human librarian studied like he was preparing for a certification exam. When one of the arena attendants asked what his specialty was, Marvin didn't look up from his reading. "I reorganize things," he said, underlining a passage about proper challenge protocol. His tone suggested he was discussing library shelving systems rather than interstellar combat. The other champions watched this behavior with increasing confusion. They couldn't decide if this human was insane, incredibly stupid, or secretly the most dangerous competitor there. His complete lack of combat readiness seemed either like supreme confidence or complete incompetence. Their species understood aggression, technology, and psychological warfare. They had no framework for understanding quiet competence mixed with apparent obliviousness. Gorthak kept cracking his knuckles louder, trying to get a reaction. Zepha intensified her mental probing. Crocs increased his mechanical humming frequency. Marvin simply turned a page in his manual and made another notation. The disconnect between their expectations and reality was creating visible frustration among the seasoned warriors. They'd prepared for combat, not for whatever this was. The arena's announcement system crackled to life, signaling the trial's imminent start. The other champions assumed fighting stances. Marvin marked his page with a library receipt and stood up, brushing sand from his trousers. He looked less like a warrior and more like someone about to give a particularly dry presentation. The galactic audience leaned forward, wondering if Earth's champion was about to reveal some hidden capability, or if this was going to be the shortest trial in history. The first challenge finally appeared, and it wasn't about strength or speed at all. The arena floor transformed into something called the Maze of Infinite Knowledge. It consisted of floating crystalline shelves containing every piece of information ever recorded in the galaxy, but none of it made any sense. The storage system followed galactic classification standards that prioritized crystalline density over actual subject matter. Information about star systems might sit next to cooking recipes if their atomic structures matched. Cross-referencing worked through quantum probability matrices instead of traditional indexing. Finding specific information required calculating the likelihood of concepts being related, rather than following subject categories. The maze constantly shifted and rearranged itself based on quantum fluctuations, making navigation nearly impossible through conventional means. Gorthak responded exactly as you'd expect. He immediately started smashing crystalline shelves with his massive hands, sending data shards flying everywhere. The information contained within those crystals scattered across the arena floor, creating more chaos than he started with. The maze simply regenerated the destroyed sections while becoming even more disorganized than before. Zepha attempted to mentally interface with the maze's information matrix. Her consciousness expanded to process the infinite knowledge, but the sheer volume overwhelmed her psychic capabilities. She retreated with what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a migraine. Her mental faculties temporarily scrambled by information overload. The maze contained too much raw data for any single mind to process effectively. Crocs approached the problem computationally. His mechanical systems began calculating pathways through the quantum probability matrices. He quickly encountered recursive logical loops that trapped his processing capabilities. His systems started overheating as they attempted to solve unsolvable logical paradoxes built into the maze's structure. The mechanical champion stood motionless, trapped in an endless calculation cycle. Marvin watched these failures with professional interest. He then did what he always did. He started organizing the chaos around him. He began gathering scattered crystal shards and sorting them by structural patterns rather than content. He noticed that similar crystalline formations tended to contain related information, regardless of their apparent subject matter. He created small islands of order within the shifting maze. These organized sections began influencing the quantum behavior of the surrounding areas. The maze's self-organizing algorithms started recognizing his patterns and adapting to them. His methodical approach created stability in the chaotic quantum environment. The AI monitoring the trial noted his progress with something resembling surprise. Its analysis indicated that the human's organizational methods were achieving a 47% higher efficiency rating than any previous participant. The system had been designed to test information management capabilities, but nobody had ever approached it through pure organizational principles before. Marvin worked with the calm efficiency of someone reshelving books after a busy weekend. He didn't try to understand the information, he just organized its container. The maze began responding to his efforts by revealing previously hidden pathways and connections. His systematic approach was effectively communicating with the arena's underlying systems through the universal language of organization. The other champions continued their futile attempts, while Marvin quietly created order from chaos. He wasn't fighting the maze, he was collaborating with it. His methods demonstrated that sometimes the best way to navigate infinite knowledge isn't through force or processing power, but through simple, effective organization. The trial was revealing that information management might be humanity's unexpected specialty. While the other champions relied on force or technology, Marvin worked with cross-references and temporary categorization. He treated the shifting quantum maze like a disorganized library after a busy weekend. His methods weren't dramatic or aggressive, they were systematic and practical. He created provisional organization systems that adapted to the maze's constant changes. He noticed something interesting about the maze's behavior. Whenever he established even small areas of order, the quantum structure responded by revealing previously hidden connections. Organized sections seemed to communicate stability to the surrounding chaos. The maze wasn't resisting organization, it was waiting for someone to provide structure. Small adjustments to his filing system created ripple effects throughout the entire quantum environment. Moving related crystalline clusters closer together caused unrelated sections to spontaneously align themselves. Correcting misaligned data categories made adjacent areas become more navigable. The maze was demonstrating that information wants to be organized even at the quantum level. After 20 minutes of quiet work, Marvin hadn't thrown a single punch or made any threats. He hadn't needed to use force or special abilities. His cardigan remained perfectly clean, his glasses unbroken. The only evidence of his efforts was the gradually improving organization spreading through the maze. He had simply made the chaotic information slightly more navigable through careful, consistent organization. The quantum probabilities started favoring logical connections over random associations. Pathways that were previously impossible to find began appearing spontaneously. The maze was transforming from an impenetrable chaos into a functional information system. A previously hidden alcove materialized near Marvin's position. It contained a single crystal key that glowed with soft, pulsing light. The key hadn't been concealed through advanced technology or powerful magic. It had been lost in the disorganization. Once Marvin cleaned up the filing system, the key appeared exactly where it should have been all along. The arena AI announced Marvin's victory in a neutral synthetic voice. The other champions stared in confused frustration. Korthak had smashed countless crystalline shelves. Zepha had nearly overwhelmed her mental capacities. Crox had crashed his processing systems multiple times. None of their aggressive approaches had achieved anything except making the maze more chaotic. Marvin picked up the crystal key and examined it with professional interest. It was right where it should have been, he commented to nobody in particular. The classification system just needed some minor adjustments. His tone suggested he was discussing a misplaced book rather than the key to interstellar victory. The galaxy's understanding of combat received a significant update in that moment. A substitute librarian had solved a challenge that specialized warriors couldn't handle. The trial demonstrated that organization could outperform aggression when dealing with complex systems. Brute force had failed completely, where methodical organization succeeded spectacularly. The arena's spectators watched as Marvin placed the key in his pocket alongside his library notes. He didn't celebrate or posture. He simply checked to make sure his pencil was still secure behind his ear. The victory felt less like a triumph and more like the satisfactory completion of a difficult task. The quiet efficiency of his approach left the galactic audience reconsidering everything they thought they knew about strength and capability. The next challenge appeared in the arena, and it wasn't at all what anyone expected. The Keeper of Forbidden Knowledge materialized as this swirling vortex of data and energy that made your eyes hurt to look at. Everyone assumed it was some powerful guardian defending precious secrets. The reality turned out to be much more complicated and much sadder. This entity wasn't a guardian at all. It was a prisoner of its own impossible workload. For thousands of years, it had collected every dangerous secret, every hidden truth, every piece of information that could potentially threaten civilizations. Its purpose was preservation, but the scale had become unmanageable. The knowledge kept growing exponentially while its ability to manage it remained static. Imagine having to organize every book ever written without any filing system or help. Now multiply that by every thought, secret, and discovery across multiple species. The Keeper existed in a state of constant overwhelm, drowning in data it could no longer process or understand. Its lashing out wasn't aggression. It was the desperate reaction of something being crushed by its own purpose. Gorthak charged forward immediately because that's what Gorthak did. He tried to attack the swirling mass of information directly. The Keeper responded by overwhelming him with avalanches of unrelated data. Historical records mixed with cooking recipes mixed with star charts buried the warrior under metaphorical weight. He struggled against information rather than physical force, and information proved much harder to fight. Zepha attempted her mental approach, trying to organize the chaos through psychic means. She reached out with her consciousness and immediately recoiled. The sheer volume of disorganized knowledge created feedback that gave her the alien equivalent of a psychic migraine. Her systems weren't designed to handle that much unstructured information at once. She retreated, mentally battered and confused. Crocs attempted his computational solution. His systems began analyzing patterns and calculating organizational matrices. The scale of the problem immediately overwhelmed his processing capabilities. His circuits crashed from computational overload, leaving him temporarily disabled. The Keeper's knowledge base was too vast and too disorganized for any conventional system to handle. Marvin watched these failures with professional interest. Where the others saw a dangerous enemy, he saw the ultimate organizational challenge. The Keeper wasn't attacking, it was drowning and flailing. Its outbursts were the reactions of something that had been alone with impossible chaos for millennia. Marvin recognized the signs of systemic collapse from his library work, just on a much larger scale. He didn't see a monster to defeat or an enemy to overcome. He saw a collection that had grown beyond its management systems. The Keeper was like a library that had never heard of the Dewey Decimal System, trying to handle every book in existence with no catalog or organization. Its suffering came from being trapped with purpose without methodology. The other champions prepared for more combat approaches. Marvin started assessing the organizational structure or lack thereof. He noticed how information flowed in chaotic patterns without any clear indexing. The Keeper wasn't guarding knowledge, it was being crushed by it. The solution wasn't defeating it, but helping it manage its impossible burden. Marvin approached the situation not as a combat challenge, but as an organizational consultation. The Keeper needed systems, not submission. It required methodology rather than mastery. Where warriors saw something to conquer, Marvin saw something to organize. His perspective shift would prove more valuable than any weapon or special power. The trial was about to become the most unusual organizational intervention in galactic history. Marvin did something that had never occurred to any previous challenger. He approached the swirling chaos of information and simply asked for permission to help. Not permission to attack or take anything, just permission to organize. He stood there in his slightly worn cardigan, holding his library notes, and made the request like he was asking to reshelve some books. He didn't approach as a challenger or conqueror. He positioned himself as a colleague facing a shared organizational problem. His body language showed professional interest rather than combat readiness. The folder in his hands contained overdue notices, not weapons. Everything about his demeanor communicated collaboration rather than confrontation. The Keeper, who had known nothing but conflict for longer than human civilization had existed, didn't understand the offer. Its entire existence had been a series of challengers trying to steal knowledge or destroy it. Nobody had ever approached with an offer of assistance. The concept of help was completely foreign to its experience. Marvin explained his proposed approach in practical terms. He mentioned implementing some basic indexing protocols to start with. He described cross-reference systems that could connect related information across different knowledge categories. His language was technical but accessible, like someone explaining library systems to a new volunteer. He spoke about maintenance routines that could prevent future information overflow. He suggested categorization methods that would make knowledge retrieval more efficient. His suggestions focused on sustainability rather than quick fixes. He was thinking about long-term management rather than temporary solutions. The keeper's aggressive swirling slowed as it considered this novel approach. The chaotic energy patterns that had been threatening moments before began to stabilize. The entity seemed to be processing the concept of assistance for the first time in its existence. The offer of help created a pause where only conflict had existed before. Vulnerability emerged where there had been only aggression. The chaotic energy patterns softened into something resembling curiosity. The defensive posture relaxed into what might be considered attentiveness. The change was subtle but significant, like watching a storm cloud suddenly reveal a patch of blue sky. The entity admitted, through patterns of shifting energy rather than words, that it had been alone with this chaos for millennia. It had watched civilizations rise and fall while struggling with its impossible burden. Every interaction it had ever experienced involved conflict over the knowledge it contained. Nobody had ever asked about its organizational challenges before. It revealed that all previous challengers had wanted either to steal the forbidden knowledge or destroy it. Some sought power, others feared what the knowledge represented. None had ever recognized that the real problem was management, rather than access or destruction. The keeper had become defined by what it contained rather than how it contained it. Marvin represented the first being who saw the systemic problem rather than the tempting power. He recognized that the valuable knowledge was becoming worthless through disorganization. His perspective shifted the focus from acquisition to accessibility, from control to utility. The librarian saw what warriors and conquerors had missed for thousands of years. The arena watched this unprecedented interaction with growing interest. Two information specialists were having a professional consultation in the middle of what was supposed to be a combat trial. The galactic audience witnessed the birth of a new approach to dealing with dangerous knowledge, one based on management rather than conflict. What followed wasn't combat in any recognizable sense. It became the most intense organizational consultation in galactic history. Two information specialists stood in the arena, having what looked like a technical discussion. The swirling chaos of forbidden knowledge became their whiteboard, their problem to solve together through shared expertise. Marvin started with basic categorization principles. He demonstrated how to group related concepts through similarity, rather than chronological accumulation. The keeper watched with growing interest as patterns emerged from what had been pure chaos moments before. They built hierarchical structures that allowed information to flow logically, rather than chaotically. Each organized section made the remaining chaos more manageable. They implemented maintenance routines to prevent future information overflow. Marvin explained the importance of regular system checks and updates. The keeper learned to prioritize incoming data, rather than accepting everything equally. Some knowledge needed immediate attention while other information could wait for later processing. The concept of triage was completely new to an entity that had always treated all information as equally urgent. The entity discovered that not everything needed preservation with equal priority. Some secrets could be archived deeply while others required easier access. This prioritization system reduced the constant pressure of managing infinite knowledge. The keeper could finally breathe, metaphorically speaking, for the first time in millennia. After 45 minutes, the transformation was complete. The entity that had threatened annihilations was now calmly organized and gratefully efficient. Its energy patterns flowed in structured, logical sequences rather than chaotic bursts. What had been a threatening presence became a model of information management. It declared Marvin the victor through what it called the greatest gift one information specialist could give another. The gift wasn't conquest or submission or even access to forbidden knowledge. It was something much more valuable and much more practical. A really good filing system. The victory celebration involved organized data streams rather than defeated opponents. Earth's champion had achieved this without throwing a single punch or making a single threat. He hadn't needed special powers or advanced technology. His weapons were organizational principles and practical experience. His victory came through problem-solving rather than combat. He solved the fundamental issue that countless warriors had been trying to fight for thousands of years. Previous challengers had approached the keeper as something to defeat or overcome. Marvin approached it as something to understand and assist. The perspective shift made all the difference between conflict and resolution. The trial of doom concluded not with explosions or dramatic confrontations, but with paperwork. Marvin helped the Keeper create proper documentation for its new systems. They established protocols for future maintenance and expansion. The arena's dramatic lighting and menacing atmosphere felt increasingly mismatched with the practical discussion happening at its center. The galactic audience watched this unprecedented conclusion with confusion, giving way to understanding. They witnessed a new approach to dealing with dangerous knowledge, one based on management rather than conflict. The quiet efficiency of organizational science had proven more effective than any weapon or special power. Marvin checked his work like he was finishing a shift at the library. He made sure all systems were properly documented and that the Keeper understood the maintenance routines. His professionalism never wavered, even while saving Earth from destruction. The substitute librarian had redefined what victory looked like in interstellar relations. The journey home felt completely different from the trip to the arena. The atmosphere aboard Commander Vexar's ship had shifted from impatient superiority to cautious respect. The alien crew members moved around Marvin with the careful precision of bomb disposal experts handling unstable antimatter. Their body language communicated constant, careful scrutiny of every minor movement he made. Vexar himself watched Marvin like someone monitoring a nuclear payload that might accidentally destroy solar systems. Every time Marvin shifted in his seat or adjusted his glasses, the commander's antenna-like armor would twitch with barely concealed tension. The military escort that had seemed so dismissive during the outward journey now treated the librarian like the most dangerous thing they'd ever transported. Marvin remained completely oblivious to the changed atmosphere. He continued reading technical manuals about alien information systems and making notes in the margins. His pencil moved steadily across the paper, recording observations about AI backup protocols and data preservation methods. He treated the advanced warship like another library branch to assess and understand. He offered practical suggestions about the ship's information management practices during meals. He mentioned that their data storage could benefit from better cross-referencing systems. He observed that their communication logs seemed disorganized compared to their technology level. His comments were delivered in the same helpful tone he used when suggesting better book return systems. Vexar listened to these organizational suggestions with the intense focus of someone receiving classified military secrets. The Galactic Commander nodded gravely at recommendations about filing systems and data categorization. He had security officers recording Marvin's every word about library management techniques. What sounded like simple administrative advice to Marvin sounded like strategic warfare doctrine to Vexar. The commander had become convinced that Earth's most dangerous weapon wasn't military technology or physical strength. He believed organizational efficiency represented humanity's true strategic advantage. The quiet competence of information management appeared more formidable than any weapon his species possessed. He saw filing systems as potential weapons and cross-references as combat strategies. Marvin didn't understand why everyone had suddenly become so interested in his administrative suggestions. He kept expecting someone to tell him they were just humoring the strange human. Instead, officers asked follow-up questions about metadata organization and collection maintenance. The technical discussions felt oddly serious for what he considered basic information management principles. He was simply doing what he'd always done, just on a spaceship instead of in a library. The scale had changed, but the work remained essentially the same. Helping organize information felt natural regardless of the setting or the species involved. The interstellar travel and advanced technology didn't alter the fundamental principles of proper knowledge management. The definition of dangerous had permanently shifted in the galactic consciousness aboard that ship. What they once considered weak or unimportant, organization, systematization, information architecture, now appeared strategically vital. The quiet librarian had demonstrated that order could overcome chaos more effectively than violence ever could. The return journey became a continuous lesson in reevaluating fundamental assumptions about power and capability. Earth prepared for the kind of hero's welcome you see in movies, parades, speeches, cheering crowds waiting for their champion to return with tales of glorious combat. What they got was Marvin explaining that there wasn't actually much fighting involved. The victory ceremony featured the substitute librarian describing his interstellar adventure as mostly light organizational consulting with a few technical notes. He stood at the podium in the same cardigan he'd worn to the arena, looking mildly confused by all the attention. He mentioned that the arena's AI could really benefit from a more robust backup system. His after-action briefing included suggestions for improving their data management protocols. The military leaders and politicians listened with growing confusion as he discussed filing systems and cross-referencing methods instead of battle strategies. The contrast between their expectations and reality created this wonderful cognitive dissonance in the room. The Galactic Council's response arrived during the ceremony. Their communication expressed deep concern about Earth's unique combat techniques of information management. They'd analyzed the trial footage and concluded that organizational efficiency represented a terrifying strategic advantage. Humanity's reputation transformed from nearly annihilated to respectfully feared in under an hour. Our greatest strength turned out to be something we'd considered administrative work. General Hawkins received Marvin's official report filed in perfect triplicate. The document contained detailed observations about alien information systems and recommendations for Earth's defense strategies. It read like a library assessment rather than a military debrief. The sections on quantum data storage were particularly thorough for someone who'd supposedly been in combat. Marvin waited patiently through the ceremony and then asked if he could get back to his actual job now. The library had been without proper supervision for over 24 hours, and he was concerned about the new book return system functioning correctly. His priorities remained firmly grounded in practical concerns rather than interstellar politics. Saving humanity was impressive, but overdue books still needed attention. Earth's defense strategy underwent permanent revision that day. Information architecture specialists became standard consultants for all military planning sessions. Library science degrees suddenly carried more strategic weight than combat training in certain circles. The quiet professionals who managed knowledge systems found themselves with unprecedented influence in security discussions. Nobody looked at library cards the same way again. What had been simple pieces of plastic became symbols of humanity's unexpected strength. The ability to organize and retrieve information became recognized as a strategic capability rather than clerical work. Library visits carried this new undertone of cosmic significance that felt both absurd and completely appropriate. The contrast between the dramatic buildup and mundane resolution created this lasting cognitive shift. Heroes didn't have to look like warriors or act like conquerors. Sometimes they looked like slightly tired librarians wearing cardigans and carrying overdue notices. Their weapons were systems and methodologies rather than guns or special powers. The homecoming celebration gradually shifted from military pomp to something resembling a professional conference. Experts discussed information management strategies while military leaders took notes. The conversation focused on organizational principles rather than combat tactics. Marvin's quiet efficiency had rewritten the rules of interstellar relations without anyone throwing a punch. Earth's position in the galactic community transformed through paperwork rather than warfare. Our reputation for administrative competence became our greatest diplomatic asset. The substitute librarian's victory demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful weapon is a well-organized filing system. The quietest solutions often prove the most effective in the loudest confrontations. The story spread across star systems faster than light travel. Combat manuals everywhere got unexpected revisions. Ancient warrior codes written in blood and tradition were suddenly supplemented with chapters on information management. The galactic understanding of conflict underwent its most significant shift in millennia. Species that had relied purely on brute force found themselves at a disadvantage. Their massive fleets and powerful weapons seemed less relevant when facing opponents who could outmaneuver them through superior organization. Military budgets shifted from weapon development to information training programs. Warriors who once prized physical strength above all else suddenly found themselves studying organizational psychology. The Trial of Doom's criteria expanded to include knowledge organization capabilities. Future challenges would test a species' ability to manage complexity as much as their combat skills. The Galactic Council realized that true strength involved more than just destructive power. It required the ability to control and utilize information effectively. Earth's reputation transformed completely. We became known not for military might but for administrative efficiency. Other species started referring to humanity as the sophisticated operators, rather than the primitive newcomers. Our paperwork suddenly carried more weight than our weapons in interstellar negotiations. Marvin's approach demonstrated something fundamental about power dynamics. The most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't destruction, it was order. Chaos could be managed and contained, but proper organization created advantages that were much harder to counter. Systems outlasted individual acts of violence. Civilizations began realizing that properly organized information could outmaneuver any physical weapon. A well-maintained database proved more valuable than an entire fleet of warships in certain scenarios. The ability to find and utilize knowledge quickly became recognized as a strategic advantage, rather than administrative work. The galactic balance of power shifted toward those who could manage complexity best. Species with advanced organizational systems found their influence growing rapidly. Traditional warrior cultures had to adapt or risk becoming obsolete in the new interstellar landscape. The quiet revolution in information management changed everything. Humanity's position improved dramatically. We went from being the new species everyone looked down upon to respected experts in information systems. Other civilizations started sending delegations to study our library systems and organizational methods. Our reputation for administrative competence became our greatest diplomatic asset. The quietest solution had proven to be the most powerful one in interspecies relations. Marvin's methodical approach achieved what thousands of years of warfare never could. It created a lasting advantage through competence rather than conflict. The substitute librarian had inadvertently given humanity the best possible reputation. Warrior training programs across the galaxy now include certification in knowledge management. Combat simulations feature information organization challenges alongside traditional battle scenarios. The definition of a complete warrior has expanded to include mental organization as well as physical readiness. The changes spread through military and civilian sectors alike. Governments restructured their operations based on organizational principles. Businesses adopted information management strategies that mirrored library science techniques. The entire galactic community began valuing order over aggression in new ways. Marvin's victory demonstrated that sometimes the strongest approach involves creating systems rather than breaking them. Building sustainable structures proved more effective than temporary conquest. The quiet competence of organization outlasted the loud drama of conflict in the galactic consciousness. The new understanding of strength favored those who could think systematically rather than act aggressively. Problem-solving ability became valued over combat proficiency. The galaxy learned that the most dangerous warriors might be those who never throw a punch, but always know where to find the right information. Marvin returned to his library like he'd just finished a particularly long shift rather than saving humanity. The familiar scent of old books and floor polish greeted him like an old friend. He hung his cardigan on the same hook he'd used for 8 years and checked the overnight book return. Everything looked exactly the same, but nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The city council offered him a permanent position with a significant raise. They even held a small ceremony presenting him with official recognition as Earth's information warfare specialist. The plaque looked somewhat ridiculous next to his modest desk, but he accepted it with polite gratitude. The real changes weren't in his job title or salary, though. They were much deeper and more interesting. Suddenly, librarians everywhere found their skills in unexpected demand. Corporations started hiring information specialists for strategic planning positions. Government agencies created new roles for knowledge management consultants. Military organizations established information architecture divisions, the quiet professionals who'd been quietly maintaining civilization's knowledge infrastructure found themselves with unprecedented influence. The story crystallized something information professionals had always known, but never been able to prove. Librarians weren't just people who stamped books and enforced quiet rules. They were information warriors who defended against misinformation and disorganization. They were masters of systematic thinking, who could find patterns in chaos. They were practical wizards who made knowledge accessible to everyone. Proper knowledge management became recognized as civilization's actual foundation. Societies could have advanced technology and powerful weapons, but without organized information systems, they'd eventually collapse under their own complexity. The ability to store, categorize, and retrieve knowledge proved more vital than any single technological advancement. Marvin's quiet demonstration showed that finding and organizing information wasn't just useful, it was survival itself. When faced with impossible challenges, systematic thinking outperformed brute force. Organized knowledge provided advantages that weapons and strength couldn't match. The survival of species might depend more on their filing systems than their military systems. The quietest profession suddenly looked like the most essential one for species survival. Library science degrees gained new respect across multiple sectors. Information management became a strategic priority rather than an administrative afterthought. The people who understood how knowledge worked found themselves in positions of unexpected influence. Marvin continued doing his job with the same quiet efficiency as always. He still worried about overdue books and budget meetings. The interstellar adventure felt increasingly distant compared to daily library operations. His co-workers asked polite questions about his unusual assignment, and he described it as interesting but messy work. The weight of saving humanity felt lighter than the responsibility of proper cataloging. He remained more concerned about implementing better cross-referencing systems in the science fiction section than about interstellar politics. General Hawkins checked in periodically for updates on information warfare developments, and Marvin suggested improved overdue notice templates as Earth's primary defense strategy. Life continued with its familiar rhythms, but now carried this quiet understanding that librarians held cosmic power. The ability to organize information wasn't just a job skill. It was a fundamental capability that could determine species survival. The substitute librarian had proven that sometimes the most important battles are fought with filing systems, rather than weapons. The transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was the gradual realization that civilization rests on organized knowledge. The people who maintain that organization aren't just administrative staff. They're guardians of something essential. Their quiet work enables everything else to function properly. Marvin's victory demonstrated that information management represents humanity's true strategic advantage. Our ability to organize and utilize knowledge effectively outweighs any physical or technological capability. The librarians who maintain these systems aren't just doing jobs, they're maintaining the foundations of civilization itself. Their quiet competence makes all other achievements possible. The galaxy learned a fundamental lesson, but a little too late for the ones who'd already underestimated Earth. Their assumptions about strength and danger had been completely wrong. They'd been looking for threats in all the obvious places: weapons, armor, physical power, and missed what was right in front of them. The most dangerous warriors don't look dangerous at all. They look like ordinary people doing ordinary jobs with extraordinary competence. Heroes come in the most unexpected disguises. They wear cardigans instead of armor, and carry overdue notices instead of weapons. Their strength isn't in their muscles, but in their methodology. They solve problems through systematic thinking rather than brute force. The galaxy had been so focused on obvious threats that it completely missed the quiet competence that actually drives civilization forward. Effective information management turned out to be a civilization-saving capability. The ability to organize knowledge systematically proved more valuable than any weapon or special power. When faced with impossible challenges, structured thinking outperformed aggression every time. The quiet work of categorization and cross-referencing achieved what thousands of years of warfare never could. Quiet, disciplined problem-solving accomplishes what violence often cannot. Force creates temporary solutions, but seldom addresses underlying issues. Systematic approaches build sustainable structures that last beyond immediate conflicts. The galaxy witnessed how methodical organization could resolve situations that had resisted military solutions for millennia. Resilience, cleverness, and care for knowledge outlast weapons and wars. Armies come and go, technology becomes obsolete, but well-organized information remains valuable across centuries. The systems that manage knowledge prove more durable than the weapons that seek to control it. Preservation defeats destruction in the long run every time. The galaxy finally understood that humanity's strength isn't in our fists, but in our filing systems. Our ability to organize information represents our true strategic advantage. Other species might have better weapons or stronger warriors, but nobody manages knowledge quite like we do. Our administrative competence became our most feared quality. Marvin represents the ordinary person who becomes extraordinary through sheer competence. He wasn't special because of genetics or training or technology. He was special because he did his job extremely well. His quiet expertise in a seemingly mundane field turned out to be exactly what the situation required. Extraordinary circumstances revealed the extraordinary value of ordinary skills. The story reframes traditional science fiction heroism around practical abilities. Heroes don't need superpowers or advanced technology to save the day. They need systematic thinking and professional competence. The most valuable skills might be the ones we use every day in our regular jobs. Practical knowledge defeats theoretical power when it matters most. Knowledge, when properly organized and defended, becomes the ultimate weapon. It's not about what you know, but how you structure what you know. Chaos is weak while order is strong. Systematic organization creates advantages that brute force cannot overcome. The galaxy learned that the most powerful weapon might be a well-designed filing system. Sometimes salvation doesn't require fighting at all. It requires better organization. The solution to impossible problems might be systematic rather than combative. Creating order can achieve what destroying opposition cannot. The quiet work of building structures proves more effective than the loud work of breaking them. The most powerful victories come through organization rather than conflict. Marvin returned to work the next morning like he'd just had an unusually long weekend rather than saved humanity from extinction. He hung his cardigan on the same hook he'd used for years and immediately checked the overnight book return bin. The familiar routine felt more real than the interstellar arena ever had. His biggest concern remained those astronomy books that were still overdue. Despite multiple notices, he still worried about budget meetings for new quiet signs and whether the coffee machine had been properly cleaned. The interstellar transport and alien arena felt increasingly distant compared to the immediate concerns of morning circulation desk duties. The cosmic scale of his adventure seemed to shrink when faced with actual library management challenges. Other librarians asked about his unusual absence with gentle curiosity. They used terms like field trip and special assignment rather than galactic trial or interstellar combat. Their questions carried the tone of co-workers asking about a conference rather than an event that determined species survival. Marvin described reorganizing millennia of galactic knowledge as interesting but messy work. His tone suggested he'd been sorting through a disorganized storage room rather than handling forbidden cosmic secrets. The scale of the accomplishment seemed less important than the quality of the organizational systems he'd implemented. He expressed more concern about implementing better cross-referencing in the science fiction section than about Earth's new galactic reputation. The practical problem of helping patrons find books felt more immediate than interstellar politics. His priorities remained firmly grounded in daily library operations rather than cosmic significance. The weight of saving humanity felt surprisingly light compared to the responsibility of proper cataloging. Ensuring books were correctly shelved and systems maintained seemed more personally important than diplomatic consequences. His professional standards hadn't changed despite the dramatically expanded context. General Hawkins checked in periodically through secure channels. She asked about information warfare developments and strategic organizational techniques. Her questions carried the gravity of military planning sessions and security briefings. Marvin responded with suggestions about better overdue notice templates and improved interlibrary loan systems. He framed these administrative improvements as Earth's primary defense strategy. His practical suggestions sounded both completely reasonable and utterly surreal in their new context. Life continued with its familiar rhythms and responsibilities. The morning coffee still needed making, the book still needed shelving, the patron still needed assistance. The daily work remained unchanged, despite the cosmic significance now attached to it. The quiet knowledge that librarians held cosmic power became just another fact of existence. It didn't change how they did their jobs, just how they understood those jobs' importance. The realization settled into daily routine without disrupting its essential nature. Marvin's cardigan still had the same loose button on the sleeve. The library's thermostat still needed regular adjustment. The photocopier still jammed every Thursday afternoon. Cosmic significance didn't change practical realities. The interstellar adventure became just another story in the library's collection of unusual occurrences. It joined the time the plumbing failed and the incident with the escaped pet parrot in the biography section. Extraordinary events eventually become part of ordinary history. The morning after galactic salvation looked exactly like the morning before it. The same sunlight through the same windows, the same smell of old books and fresh coffee, the same quiet hum of computers booting up. Salvation changed everything without changing anything at all. The cosmic and the mundane existed together without conflict. Interstellar significance and overdue notices occupied the same mental space. The infinite and the immediate coexisted in perfect harmony through systematic organization. Changes spread through star systems faster than anyone could have predicted. What started as one librarian's unusual assignment became a galaxy-wide reevaluation of basic assumptions. The ripple effects extended far beyond Earth's solar system, touching everything from politics to military training to diplomatic relations. Galactic Council meetings now include information architecture specialists sitting alongside military advisors. These new participants don't discuss weapons or strategy in the traditional sense. They talk about data organization, knowledge management systems, and information flow optimization. Their contributions carry the same weight as discussions about fleet deployments or planetary defenses. The council chambers that once echoed with debates about military spending now also host conversations about database structures. Warrior training programs across multiple species have incorporated knowledge management certification requirements. Combat schools that previously focused exclusively on physical training now include courses on information organization. Trainees learn cross-referencing techniques alongside combat maneuvers. The definition of a complete warrior has expanded to include mental organization as well as physical readiness. Battle simulations now test both combat skills and information management capabilities. Species that once mocked Earth as primitive newcomers now send delegations to study our library systems. Their experts examine everything from our cataloging methods to our interlibrary loan protocols. They take extensive notes on our organizational principles and implementation strategies. The same civilizations that look down on humanity now seek to understand our administrative techniques. Our library science has become a strategic export. Interstellar conflicts increasingly resolve through organizational mediation rather than military confrontation. Disputes that would have previously led to fleet engagements now involve information specialists helping parties organize their differences. The focus has shifted from defeating opponents to finding systematic solutions. The quiet work of mediation has prevented more conflicts than any peace treaty ever could. The definition of power in galactic politics has permanently expanded to include information control. Military strength still matters, but organizational capability now carries equal weight. Civilizations are evaluated based on their knowledge management systems as much as their weapon systems. The balance of power has shifted toward those who can organize information effectively. Earth's diplomatic position has transformed completely. We've gone from vulnerable newcomers to respected experts in information systems. Other species consult our specialists on organizational challenges across multiple sectors. Our reputation for administrative competence has become our greatest diplomatic asset. The quiet professionals who maintain our knowledge infrastructure now have unprecedented influence. Marvin's techniques have become standard curriculum in advanced combat schools across multiple systems. His organizational methods are taught alongside traditional combat strategies. The substitute librarian's approach to problem-solving has influenced military thinking galaxy-wide. His quiet efficiency has become a model for strategic thinking. The quiet substitute librarian has indirectly reshaped interspecies relations forever. His methods have created a new framework for resolving conflicts and managing complexity. The galactic community has adopted organizational principles that make cooperation easier and conflict less likely. His influence extends far beyond anything he could have imagined. One man's organizational skills have prevented more conflicts than any weapon ever could. His systematic thinking has resolved situations that would have required military intervention in the past. The quiet work of organization has proven more effective than the loud work of combat. The ripple effects continue spreading, making the galaxy slightly more organized and substantially more peaceful with each passing cycle. This story keeps resonating because it's never really about one librarian saving the day. It's about completely reevaluating our assumptions about strength and capability. We've been conditioned to look for heroes in all the obvious places: soldiers, leaders, people with visible power, while overlooking the quiet competence that actually makes civilization function. The narrative challenges us to question what true power looks like in any context, from interstellar politics to daily life. The story suggests that our most valuable skills might be the ones we dismiss as mundane or unimportant. Organizational competence gets framed as clerical work rather than strategic advantage. Systematic thinking gets categorized as administrative rather than essential. We prioritize flashy abilities over practical ones, dramatic solutions over sustainable ones. The narrative argues that this perspective might be completely backwards. Civilization itself depends on information management more than we ever acknowledge. Our ability to organize knowledge enables everything else to function. Advanced technology, complex societies, even basic communication, all rely on systematic information handling. The story makes this dependence visible by removing the usual context. When you strip away the familiar settings, the essential nature of organized knowledge becomes impossible to ignore. Humanity's resilience gets shown through adaptability and cleverness rather than force. Our strength isn't in overpowering challenges but in outthinking them. The narrative demonstrates that systematic problem-solving often achieves what aggression cannot. The quiet work of building structures proves more effective than the loud work of breaking them. Sustainable solutions outperform temporary victories every time. The story satisfies because it confirms something we quietly suspect but rarely see demonstrated. Ordinary people with ordinary skills can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances require it. Competence matters more than special abilities. Dedication to craft proves more valuable than natural talent. The victory matters specifically because it's achievable by anyone who masters their field thoroughly. It demonstrates that sometimes the solution isn't more power but better organization. Adding force to chaotic situations often creates more chaos. Adding structure to chaotic situations creates stability. The narrative shows how methodical approaches resolve issues that resistance cannot. Systematic thinking transforms problems rather than just combating them. Ultimately, the story suggests that saving the world might require a librarian rather than a soldier. The quiet professionals who maintain our knowledge infrastructure might be more essential than the dramatic figures who dominate our attention. Their work enables everything else to function properly. Their competence creates the foundation that makes other achievements possible. The narrative reframes heroism around practical skills rather than special powers. It values systematic thinking over dramatic action. It prioritizes sustainable solutions over temporary victories. The story matters because it challenges our basic assumptions about value and importance. It suggests we've been looking for strength in all the wrong places while overlooking it where it actually exists. The quiet victory of organization over chaos resonates because it reflects a deeper truth about how things actually work. Dramatic solutions make good stories but poor strategies. Sustainable approaches create lasting change where flashy ones create temporary effects. The most valuable work often happens quietly in the background, unnoticed until it's suddenly essential. The narrative just makes this invisible importance visible through interstellar scale. We leave the story reconsidering everything from our career choices to our educational priorities. The skills that seem mundane might be the ones that matter most when things get serious. The quiet professionals we overlook might be the ones who actually hold things together. The narrative doesn't just entertain. It makes us rethink our entire value system around capability and importance. The galaxy learned something fundamental about power that day. It isn't in weapons or strength, it's in organized knowledge. Next time you see a librarian reshelving books or managing archives, remember they might be Earth's most dangerous warrior. Their quiet work maintains the systems that make civilization possible. Sometimes salvation doesn't require fighting at all. It requires better organization, clearer systems, and methodical thinking. The solutions that last aren't the loudest ones, they're the ones built on competence rather than conflict. Order outlasts chaos every time when someone knows how to create it properly.